All right, picture this. You are trying to pull off the most meticulously planned corporate defense strategy in modern pharmaceutical history. Today, we're diving into this explainer to unpack the exact playbook Teva Pharmaceuticals used to defend their blockbuster multiple sclerosis drug, Copaxone. It is this totally fascinating, incredibly high-stakes collision of medicine, patent law, and, well, some really aggressive market tactics.
To really wrap our heads around why Teva went to such extreme lengths, we have to look at the staggering stakes involved here. We're not talking about some minor side hustle for the company. Copaxone was pulling in $4.3 billion globally across 2013 and 2014. It was an absolute cash cow.
And when you actually break down that revenue, the vulnerability for Teva was honestly terrifying. This single 20 milligram daily injection accounted for 21% of their total revenue and a jaw-dropping 50% of their entire profit. It was literally keeping the company afloat. But there was this massive threat on the horizon. Generic challengers were lining up, and a massive patent cliff was looming in May 2014. So for the Copaxone brand, this was a straight-up matter of corporate life or death.
So that brings us to the ultimate corporate dilemma. How exactly do you protect a monopoly that is legally required to expire? When the law dictates that your exclusive rights are up and you don't have some new miracle drug ready to just instantly replace it, how do you keep the competition out?
Well, you use a highly controversial tactic known as product hopping. Instead of fighting a losing battle in patent court, you actively move your entire market, meaning the doctors and the patients, to a new formulation before the competition even shows up. The secret sauce here relies entirely on pharmacy laws. If you switch patients to what's called a non-AB-rated formulation, so a drug with a slightly different dosage or schedule that pharmacists aren't legally allowed to just swap out for a generic, those standard generic substitution laws at the pharmacy counter, they simply never trigger.
Now, you've probably heard the term evergreening. That's where a company tweaks a drug just to extend its patents on paper. But product hopping is a totally different, way more aggressive beast. While evergreening is all about extending legal documents, product hopping is entirely about extending your grip on the actual customers in the real world. So how do you actually pull off a massive maneuver like this? Teva didn't just gently suggest a new product to doctors and hope for the best. They executed what antitrust lawyers call a hard switch, which they eventually had to pivot into a highly coercive soft switch. Antitrust lawyers actually describe this using a really great real estate analogy. Step 1 is creating a brand new house. In this case, Teva developed a new 40 milligram dose of Copaxone that only had to be injected 3 times a week instead of every single day. Step 2, aggressively shove everyone inside that new house before the old 20 milligram house collapses from the weight of incoming generic competition.
And the economics of building that new house were just an absolute no-brainer. The initial investment to run the trials for that 40 milligram version was roughly $50 to $100 million. Now, that sounds like a ton of money, right? Until you realize the reward. They successfully secured new formulation and dosing patents that locked down their monopoly all the way out to 2030.
But to force everyone into this new house, Teva executed a truly ruthless conversion campaign. They basically mobilized a small army of sales reps and nurses to call every single 20 milligram patient, offering free nursing support to, smooth out their transition. And more controversially, they actually threatened to pull the old 20 milligram drug off the market entirely. They even locked up specialty pharmacies with exclusionary contracts, essentially paying the middlemen, the pharmacy benefit managers, to make sure generic alternatives wouldn't be easily stocked or covered by insurance.
But Teva's absolute genius in all of this was the timing. They managed to get the 40 milligram version approved in January 2014, which was just months before the old patents expired in May. And because of regulatory delays, the first generic challenger didn't even get approved until April 2015. This created this critical 15-month golden window. Teva had the entire market to themselves to unopposedly convert all those patients.
This isn't just about moving patients around, though. It's about hitting a very specific mathematical goal. And the financial engineering behind this product hop makes it a literal masterclass in corporate defense.
By the time Sandoz's generic drug finally launched in April 2015, Teva's campaign had worked phenomenally well. I mean, they had successfully migrated a massive 71% of their patient base over to the new patent-protected 40 milligram dose. Only 29% of patients were left on the old version.
And this brings us to a really devastating industry metric known as the generic kill threshold. In the pharma world, a 60 to 70% conversion rate is the magic number. Complex generic drugs cost tens of millions of dollars to develop and manufacture.
So by moving 71% of the patients away, Teva starved the generic drug's addressable market so severely that the generic manufacturer couldn't even recoup their own fixed development costs. The generic launched, sure, but there was barely anyone left to sell it to.
Because they successfully starved out the generics, Teva's return on investment for this maneuver was completely astronomical. We're talking over 3,000%. That initial $50 to $100 million trial investment ended up protecting a $3 billion a year U.S. franchise for 6 extra years. Now, obviously, you can't execute a maneuver this aggressive and this wildly lucrative without attracting the attention of regulators. While the strategy was a massive commercial success, it triggered a tidal wave of antitrust liability that is still playing out in global courts right now.
Here in the United States, the fallout is ongoing. There are active lawsuits stretching into 2024 and 2025 from direct purchasers, so the wholesalers and pharmacies who are forced to pay artificially high prices. They're currently alleging that Teva suppressed generic competition through copay manipulation, kickbacks, and those exclusionary contracts we talked about. The U.S. legal system is actively trying to figure out where the line is between smart business and illegal monopolization.
Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, the hammer has already dropped. On October 31, 2024, the European Commission officially concluded that Teva abused its dominant position. They found that Teva intentionally manipulated the patent system by creating this crazy patent web, basically spamming the system with staggered patents and strategically withdrawing them right before court hearings, just to infinitely delay invalidity rulings. On top of that, they found Teva systematically spread misinformation about the safety of rival generic drugs, even after health authorities had explicitly cleared them.
And as a direct result of those findings, the European Union hit Teva with a 462.6 million euro fine. That's equivalent to about 503 million US dollars. It actually makes it the largest pharmaceutical antitrust fine in history for this specific type of exclusionary conduct.
But here is the most fascinating and honestly perhaps the most troubling takeaway from this entire saga. Despite these historic headline-making fines, this precise Copaxone Playbook hasn't been abandoned at all. In fact, it's pretty much become the standard defense template for virtually every massive pharmaceutical company facing a major patent cliff today.
The modern industry realization is profound, and it's perfectly summed up by this simple mantra: if you can't win on patent, win on prescription habit. You don't actually need to legally stop generics in a courtroom. You just need to make them completely irrelevant to the doctors and the patients in the clinic. To replicate this today, brands follow this exact calculated blueprint. First, launch a slightly more convenient version roughly 18 to 24 months before your exclusivity expires. Second, keep the price exactly the same. Third, aggressively transition the patients using free nursing and support services. And finally, make the old version incredibly hard to find before the law even has a chance to catch up. Which leaves us with a really fascinating reality to ponder as we wrap up this explainer. Just look at the math. Teva paid a $500 million fine, sure, but they successfully protected billions of dollars in revenue for over half a decade. When the legal penalties are just a tiny fraction of the monumental profits, what incentive does the pharmaceutical industry have to ever stop playing this game? It's a multi-billion-dollar question that regulators are still struggling to answer. So next time you're at the pharmacy counter, keep questioning the strategies you see playing out. Thanks so much for joining me to unpack this.